Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to It's Rainmaking Time. This is Kim Greenhouse. I'm here today with a very heavy hitter. His name is Edwin Vieira. He holds 4 degrees from Harvard. He has more than 30 years practiced law with emphasis on constitutional issues. In the Supreme Court of the United States, he successfully argued or briefed the cases leading to the landmark decisions Abood versus Detroit Board of Education, Chicago Teachers Union versus Hudson, and Communications Workers of America versus Beck, which established constitutional and statutory limitations on the uses to which labor unions in both the private and the public sectors may apply fees extracted from non-union workers as a condition of their employment. Not only has he written numerous monographs and articles in scholarly journals and lectured throughout the country, his most recent work on money and banking is actually in a later book, is called Pieces of 8. It's a 2-volume book. It's about the monetary powers and disabilities of the United States Constitution, 2002, the most comprehensive study in existence in American monetary law and history, viewed from a constitutional perspective. He is the co-author of a book called hMaker, A Federal Affair 2000, a not-so-fictional story of an engineered crash of the Federal Reserve System and the political upheaval and its causes. His latest book, How to Dethrone the Imperial Judiciary, is another blockbuster in his mix, and Constitutional Homeland Security, Volume 1, The Nation in Arms. Ladies and gentlemen, God help us all. Welcome to It's Rainmaking Time, Edwin Vieira. Good afternoon, sir.
My pleasure to be with you.
I don't know what to say to you. My God, I don't think very few people in the world have treaded the terrain that you have. Do you know any?
Well, not all of it. Obviously, people such as Ed Griffin have covered the Federal Reserve to some degree, and you'll find some people in the area of the Second Amendment, but no one, I think, that has covered all of those areas.
In one of your articles that I looked at on the website, I think it was in something titled, If Not Now, When?
Mm-hmm.
You made a distinction between not just focusing on the law, but looking at the lawlessness. It was one of the many things that you said, but to really understand the level of lawlessness that's occurring. Is that not the context for what we're seeing in the world today?
I think it's the context for what you've been seeing for a number of generations. It's been moving along at a relatively steady pace, but at a certain stage you reach what they call in nuclear physics, the critical mass, where so much is going on that essentially you get a blow-up. And I think that's what's happened in our system. You've seen certainly from the turn of the 20th century, coming into the 20th century, you began to see systematic subversion of the Constitution. A fair amount of that went on during the World War I period with the Federal Reserve System was put in. The 16th Amendment was put in for the income tax. The draft was put in for the armed forces. A number of things along that line. Then, of course, you come into the 1930s, major changes were made, what I would call subversive changes in the Constitution, not only in the monetary field with the gold seizure by Franklin Roosevelt and the outlawry of gold clause contracts, expansion of the powers of the Federal Reserve, but you also had expansion of the powers of the executive branch and of Congress because of a number of rulings that the Supreme Court made in the late 1930s. And subsequently, after World War II, you really had an expansion, especially in more recent years with the 2 Bush administrations and now the Obama administration, of this concept of a very strong president, actually I would say an unconstitutional president, president that's exercising powers along the lines of something that looks like Mussolini, really, if you want to make some parallels. But this development has been going on, and what you've seen happening was, number one, a breakdown of the federal system, so that more and more powers were gravitating away from the states and into the government in Washington, D.C. And then further concentration of those powers in the executive branch of government.
When you say executive branch,
from Congress, which is the more representative body, and moving them into the executive branch of government. And the courts, increasingly stepping away and refusing to deal with these constitutional problems. So they're essentially washing their hands of the whole matter in a Pontius Pilate style. And what you see then is more and more power has concentrated in essentially one office, the office of the President of the United States now. And at this stage, for all intents and purposes, he can apparently get away with what he wants to.
And do you also see that one of the things that really worries me, although it goes on very quietly, and always has with every single president, is the executive authority, the executive orders instrument to completely bypass Bill of Rights, habeas corpus, Constitution, Declaration of Independence, our foundational documents. I don't understand why it was created. Do you?
Well, the executive order is a good example of where you had a real perversion in the legal system. In principle, an executive order was originally designed and should be limited to those areas of the administration where the president has discretion over how his subordinates are supposed to operate. So essentially, he's telling the people within his area of legal competence that you're supposed to behave in certain manners. That doesn't mean that he can tell me or he can tell you how to deal in that way. Congress then added to this by passing some statutes which purported to give the president certain kinds of powers in certain kinds of circumstances. So you have some of these so-called emergency powers that have been granted. I don't think they need the word emergency. If they have the power to grant it, they have the power to grant it. But in any event, it gives the president, under certain circumstances, the power to do this, that, or the other thing, and then the president will promulgate one of these executive orders pursuant to that statutory authority. So some of these executive orders are legitimate because they deal solely with activities within the administration that the president has discretion and control. Some of them may be legitimate because they are promulgated by the president pursuant to statutory authority that Congress is constitutionally entitled to give the president, because the president is, of course, the office that executes most of the laws, puts into effect, that is, most of the laws that Congress enacts. So Congress can do that. But what we've seen happening then is this executive order concept expanding into areas where the president simply says, well, I'm now going to direct some area of American activity.
By doing so, isn't it a total bypass of that authority? It's like bypassing it and expanding it into the infinite.
Well, it's attempting to expand it. You see, the president has no power to expand his authority, neither does Congress. The Constitution limits them. This is just usurpation, as our founding fathers would have said. This is the exercise of a power that the president doesn't have, or in some cases even the exercise of the power that Congress doesn't have, because Congress may draft a statute that's unconstitutional, gives the president unconstitutional authority. So we see a lot of usurpation. Now, when that usurpation is directed towards the aggrandizement of special interest groups, which probably in 99% of the cases it is, then we have another technical word for it that the founding fathers used, and that's tyranny. So we're seeing a great deal of usurpation and tyranny that has been going on since certainly the turn of the 20th century, and it's become exponential now. You know, that curve is going up hyperbolically, so that the people in Washington essentially see no limitations on their power. And the classic example of that, not too long ago, Nancy Pelosi, the House of Representatives, Speaker of the House of Representatives, was at a press conference, and one of the reporters asked her, what was the basis in the Constitution for Congress's power to enact this present health care bill?
I was just going to ask you about that.
And remember what she said?
What?
Well, this was the question. Where is this authority? Where is the authority in the Constitution? And she said, this is an exact quote, "Are you kidding?" Her response to that newsman was, "Are you kidding?" As if to say, forget it. We don't need to worry about that. I don't have to show you any stinking badges.